Hi, everyone. My name is Bill Leton. I'm a retired firefighter. I live on the central coast of California, and I had a near-death experience in 1994 when I was on duty, and it was very profound. I couldn't really talk about it. Back in those days, I didn't have any place to look for answers. Couldn't even begin. So I kind of kept it quiet for 15, 16 years, and when I retired, it came roaring back. I went looking for answers, and that goes into a whole nother story with ancient knowledge and how the shamans and the Native Americans really didn't pick up on the whole story with the history and religion and science that we've all heard the last several hundred years. So that's where it'll lead. But I'll start off with my near-death experience in 1994. So I was on duty. I worked at a station 11. It was a paramedic engine down in Goleta. And there was a flu epidemic going on in the Santa Barbara area. And all the emergency rooms were full of people suffering. And we were running calls, just like COVID, EMS, public safety. They're still out there doing their thing. So we came across this lady who was cooped up in her room. It was a medical emergency. She was cooped up in her room and all the drapes were shut and she was suffering horribly. And so myself, paramedic, just sprung into action. And I climbed across her to get a mask on her. And just as I was getting it adjusted, she exhaled and I inhaled and I felt it go right in. So after a couple of days, I was super ill, like I've never been before. And it got so ill that I needed an ambulance. And I remember I got out of bed and it was doing this dehydration thing where, you're throwing up and it's going the other way and you're just running out of fluids in your body. And I looked in the mirror and I looked super gaunt, like a skeleton. I was dark and I said, well, something's wrong here. And my heart rate was just racing. It was like 150. And I felt my pulse in my radial pulse, down by your wrist. And I couldn't get a pulse. So I knew my blood pressure was below 80. So I called my family. My niece dialed 911 and Santa Barbara County Fire came, picked me up, started a couple of IVs, took me in code 3 to the ambulance to a hospital in Santa Maria, and I went into a place that was full of people with the same type of symptoms. The doctor who was in charge, he was just broadcast prescribing everybody. He was giving them something for the pain, which was a morphine type thing, and something for nausea. And I was there for about half an hour, and the IVs, they put a couple of bags in me, and I was like, you know what? I think I can go home and we'll just take it from there. We'll start some kind of treatment. And the nurse came in and said, nope, these are orders. Everyone in here is getting the same thing. And me being a good sport, I said, sure. And I was sitting up, ready to go home. And she pushed the Nubane, which is a synthetic morphine, and the other thing for nausea. I didn't have neither one of those things were bothering me, nausea or severe pain. But anyway, my wife said she pushed it all in at once, and your eyes rolled back. It was like watching a cartoon. Your eyes rolled back, and you fell straight back on the bed that you were climbing out of. And that kind of freaked them out. And everybody came in and she said they Narcaned you. And Narcan is what, paramedics use for addicts, people with opiate overdoses, because it wipes out the opiates like instantly as soon as it hits your system. And she said they Narcaned you a couple of times. They started more IVs and they put you in the head down and you were gone. And they couldn't get a blood pressure. It was, you were down 40 over zero. And they put you up in intensive care, and I spent the night there. In the morning, they said the only reason you probably survived was I was a triathlete. I was doing Ironmans and stuff. So I had this tremendous system for perfusing oxygen. So nothing was really getting completely shut down. So during that night, what the morphine did was it vasodilated my whole system. I have a vessel and it's full of liquid, it's full of fluid. And suddenly all the vessel walls got huge, got really big. So the fluid that was left, became not enough to really get any circulation, any perfusion. So during that night, I was, like I said, I never regained consciousness. But somewhere in the middle of the night, 1 o'clock in the morning, 1:30, something like that, I left my body. And it was the most amazing feeling. It was like I'd been let out of a hot, stuffy closet. And I was released into this world of, I called them stars. There was these giant colored stars all around me, and I was flying through them, and they were so welcoming and they were so loving. People call these things like orbs and stuff. What we really appear as is sort of these energetic beings. And I was this huge expanded cloud of some sort. It was ridiculous how good it felt. So I'm flying along and just feeling ecstatic, like some sort of cosmic orgasm. It was just flowing through me, and like somebody was pouring honey all over my brain, and it was running down through all my nerves, and everything was just alive and exhilarating. It's a real challenge to come here into this place, into this world. So I'm flying along, and it's like, what was that? And it's like, I was like shaking my head saying, how in the world did I forget who I really was? How is that possible that I was convinced that I was this person and that I had all these relationships and all these issues? And because none of it was true, it was all an illusion. And it was some sort of a trick or a game that comes with coming into the material world, coming into Earth as a person. So I'm flying along, and these orbs are all around me, these stars, these colored wonderful things, and they're just, everything was acceptance and love and joy and like a homecoming, like I was parading through this group. And all of a sudden I landed in a place that was solid. It was real. It was had indirect lighting. There were tables there and equipment, and there were beings there. And right in front of me were these three short little dumpy guys in these dark robes with hoods, and I could see parts of their faces, and they were smiling from ear to ear. Their eyes were bright, and they were asking me all kinds of questions, and they were giggling, and I was very confused. But I saw a picture of this movie Communion, and so I watched the movie. This was years ago, and those dark little elf-looking guys that Christopher Walken is hanging with in a spaceship or whatever they're portraying there, they looked exactly like that, except they were super good-natured, playful, mischievous, and they had big smiles on their face, and their eyes were bright, and they were saying a lot of personal things, like, how was it? What can you tell us? What did you learn? And one of them looked at me, and he turned to the other two, and he said, he doesn't remember us. And they all started giggling. And I was thinking, I kind of remember you guys, but I'm having a little trouble here. And then there was this other guy, and he was kind of in charge. And he was this tall, wispy guy, like a kind of a trimmed down Gumby or one of those cactus. And he looked like he was made out of vapor or mist or something. And when he walked, it was like I was looking at somebody underwater. Parts of him were separating and then catching up. And he smiled from ear to ear. And he had the brightest eyes. So this tall, wispy guy, he was kind of in charge, but it wasn't like he was doing his job, because everything was sort of mischievous. Everyone was just sort of bouncing around. And when he came close to me, my chest expanded, my throat was constricted, and I felt like I was going to burst into uncontrollable crying from love. There was so much love coming from this being that it was overwhelming. So there wasn't much going on there. It wasn't very organized. The three guys were giggling and bouncing around, and the tall, wispy guy was just kind of chuckling and smiling. And at one point I said, well, I'm not going back there. So you guys want to get on with what are we going to do? A review of my life? Is that what's next? And the tall, wispy guy just laughed. He just chuckled. It's the deepest laugh I've ever heard. And he said, sure, let's do that. How do you want to start? And I thought, this is not what it's supposed to be. So anyway, I told a few stories. Nothing, no big regrets. Just a couple of things. There was a park ranger job on an island. My wife wanted me to take it. We would have been on an island by ourselves for the summer, and I took this other job. I thought it would be nice if I would have taken that job, but that's the only thing that came up. And he said, okay, that's enough. Time to go back. And I was like, go back? I'm like, dude, no way. I am not going back. What are you talking about? I'm here. He said, nope, you got things to do, and you're going back. And the three little guys, it's like they were reassigned. They just disappeared off to some other place in this facility, whatever it was. And he came forward towards me and said, time to go back. And I said, I had to try. So I said, hey, look, boss, the only people who are going to really miss me is my wife and my parents. And they'll be sad for a couple weeks, but they'll get over it. They're strong people. They will persevere. And he thought that was funny. And he said, nope, you're going back. And just like that, the place just started to dematerialize. Parts of it were breaking up, like I was going to another channel. And I do believe that all of our perceived reality in other dimensions, it's all channels. It's all frequencies. You have completely different realities right here, all around us, right here and right now. So I felt a descending, I think it was a drop in frequency. That was a definite descending feeling. And he just sort of evaporated, and I dropped away into darkness. And I got down near my body, and just before I went back in my body, I was at this place that really scared me. And I didn't want to admit that for years, but I figured people should know there is a place that we don't want to hang out. And it's very close to where we are now in the physical. And it was lonely and it was dismal. Yeah, you don't want any part of that. And after that, I was back in my body. And a few hours later, I woke up and I noticed the equipment. I was hooked up to all this equipment. I noticed the equipment, the blood pressure was starting to climb, and it was in the 44/0 or something. And I could be awake for a little bit and then I'd be out again. And I just kept waking up and looking at that, and the numbers kept going up, and it was in the 60s and it was in the 70s. And a nurse came by and she said, "You're awake." And I said, "I need to talk to you." She goes, I need to tell the doctor. And you've been on, we didn't know what was going to happen with you." And I said, "Okay, but first," I go, "what am I doing back here? I was home. I was with my best friend, my brothers I'd known forever. How is it that I got back here?" And I said, "I thought I bought the farm. I was sure of it." And she said, "Honey, you were in escrow, but you fell out. And now you're back with us and you're going to have to get over it." And I thought that was pretty good. But I was pretty depressed for a few days, not clinically depressed like some people suffer from, but sad to be back. And you could feel it slipping away. You could feel that it was going to fade. And pretty soon you could talk yourself out of that it even happened. And I told everybody I knew, I said, "Hey, there is nothing ever to worry about with this death thing. It's a joke. We've got it completely backwards. It's an absolute 10 million% upgrade instantly." So some guys would come to me if they lost a child or a parent and they were struggling. And I'd tell them that exact thing. I said, "Nobody died. We've just slipped out of the physical and we've gone home." Because when I left my body through all those things, I was still me. And this is a stretch for people. I was still me at my core. I had the same kind of mischievous sense of humor. The mental talk that goes on in our heads, I was still me. It was a flawless change. I just crossed over. I was still me and I was somewhere else. So I guess the point I'm saying is all of us who've lost, we've all lost people we love. And it's the worst thing that happens to us in this life. And we've never lost anybody. We've never lost our pets. They're all right here. They're right next to us. After a couple of weeks, I heard Tony Woody recently. He's the Navy chief, had a near crash in a P-3 Orion, I think it was. And he said that a officer came by and said, "You better stop telling this story." And that's exactly what happened to me. It was just a slight thing. It was a coworker. He said, "Hey, dude, just so you know, people are starting to talk about you." And I'm like, here's the most wonderful news any person could ever hear throughout history. And I got to stow it away somewhere. So I zipped it and I dummied up for 15 years. And in 2010, I retired. The story takes a little turn.